It's OPB Politics Now for Friday, May 17th. Since the 1990s, the bow-tie-wearing, bike-riding Democratic Congressman Earl Blumenauer was rather sleepily reelected for 14 terms in one of the nation's safest congressional seats. But the race to replace him in the 3rd Congressional District is a lot more lively, thanks in large part due to a flood of dark money. And over in the 5th Congressional District, the high-stakes race is perhaps one of the most closely watched in the country. Welcome to the podcast. We're going to dive deep into two of the state's most important congressional races. I'm OPB Politics reporter Lauren Dake.
I'm OPB Politics reporter Dirk Vanderhart.
I'm OPB Politics reporter Bryce Dole.
Dirk, let's just be real honest with our listeners. You did not really want to cover the 3rd congressional race. We all expected it to be just a little bit boring.
Yeah, I will confess, I was fairly grudging when we were talking in a meeting about who would take which election story to pick this one up, because you're right, Lauren, there wasn't initially a lot exciting about this. This race features 3 central candidates. That's State Representative Maxine Dexter of Portland, Sushila Jayapal, the former commissioner on the Multnomah County Commission, who actually stepped down to run in this race, and Eddie Morales, who is a Gresham city councilor. And they just don't disagree on pretty much anything. Oregon's 3rd Congressional District scoops up almost all of the east side of Portland and stretches out east to Hood River. It is by far the most liberal congressional district in the state. And so all 3 of these major candidates are sort of proclaiming what you would expect. Things like defending the right to an abortion, defending democracy from attack, battling climate change, fighting to make healthcare more affordable, and on and on and on, sort of this laundry list of progressive ideals they all support. So there's just not much daylight. What we've seen for much of this race is the candidates instead talking about their different backgrounds and how that maybe uniquely qualifies them to go to Washington. Maxine Dexter, is a doctor, but she's also a state representative who has worked on housing issues. Jayapal is a former corporate attorney turned nonprofit board member turned elected official who says she's by far the most progressive person in this race. And Morales spent a good chunk of his time working in DC politics, but also has a very compelling personal story that's really given him actually some hard-won insight into things like immigration and the addiction crisis that have impacted his family. Until things really got going, I would say a few weeks back, these were the main themes of this race.
And there is serious outside cash flooding into this district, and most of it is benefiting Dexter.
Right. Yeah. And that is what has made this race head-turning for us, but also for people who watch primaries nationally. It is this major amount of spending that has gone into this race. It is now in the top 10, or at least was in the top 10 of congressional primaries seeing outside spending. This spending is coming in part in the form of just routine campaign donations, but mostly it's been coming in the form of independent expenditures. And just to be very clear for listeners, those are a type of federal campaign spending where outside groups can spend as much as they want without any sort of, spending limits, supporting or attacking a candidate as long as they don't coordinate at all with any candidate they might be helping. And Congressional District 3, as I say, has seen a ton of this. Much of it has come from a group called 314 Action Fund that has been around, I think, for 8 years or so. Its stated purpose is supporting Democratic candidates that have a science background. And so obviously that seems tailor-made for supporting doctors like Dexter. The group has spent more than $1.6 million, a lot of money on ads supporting Dexter in this race. They sound a little bit like this.
She's a mom, a state rep, and a physician. Dr. Maxine Dexter, above all, is a problem solver.
And so these kind of ads, virtually blanketing Portland area airwaves and online, can lead to a big advantage, right? Until recently, Dexter had been trailing other major candidates in fundraising, but that doesn't matter that much when you have someone else doing all the advertising for you.
Right. Money often helps. It is, like you said, often an advantage, but it's also led to a lot of blowback for Dexter. So why is that?
Yeah, there are a couple of reasons. I mean, the first is that we have no clear idea who is actually paying for this. 314 Action won't have to report its donors who specifically funded this round of spending until May 20, just because of the timelines of the Federal Election Committee process. And that's the day before Oregon's primary, obviously in an all-male state when a lot of people have already voted. That has created a lot of suspicion, I would say. For months now, people looking at this race have been saying they expected an infusion of money from groups that are staunchly pro-Israel. Groups like AIPAC, which is the most powerful pro-Israel lobbying group in the country. And we know that AIPAC has been interested in Democratic primary races this year, principally because it wants to sort of fight candidates it doesn't believe support Israel enough. The suspicion in this race has been that Sushila Jayapal would be a target because she's been pretty forceful in calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. Actually, Dexter has called for a ceasefire too. But more than that, Jayapal's sister Pramila is a congresswoman from Seattle who's been staunchly critical of the war in Gaza. We should mention here, too, that there's another outside group spending big in this race on independent expenditures as well. This one, this very shadowy super PAC called Voters for Responsive Government that hasn't stated, why it was created. It was created fairly recently. We have no idea who's funding it, but it's been paying for attack ads and mailers against Jayapal that sound a little like this.
The governor took back millions in homeless funds after Jayapal and the commission failed to use it.
Sort of just attacking Jayapal's record as an elected official. All of this is getting around to say that, Jayapal and Morales have looked at this outside spending that doesn't benefit them, and they have decided to go on the attack. They even held a joint press conference recently to call on Dexter to demand transparency for all this spending helping her. They even suggested that MAGA money might be helping her, Make America Great Again, Trump-affiliated money, though they didn't offer any evidence. But here's just a little bit of the press conference.
This outside dark money spending must stop. And today, we are standing together to urge Maxine Dexter to demand 314 Action either reveal their donors immediately or stop meddling in our election and let the Democratic voters of our community decide who will be their next congressperson.
And here's the last thing I'll say, Lauren, because I know I'm going on, but I want to note that even as Jayapal and Morales are sort of railing against this, what they would call interference in the race, they have showed every sign of being open to this same kind of help. Like Dexter, they both have pages on their websites designed to act as a resource to any outside spending groups that might want to help their campaign. Those pages include things like talking points the candidates want to hear in ads, direction about where they would like ads to appear, photos or video that can be used. I mean, that is not something either of them mentioned when they were talking about all this, but there is some subtext there that I think we should point out.
Well, also, their pleas for it to stop has also not really worked. I mean, Maxine Dexter reported a massive single-day fundraising haul just last week, which appears now to be connected to pro-Israel donors.
Well, that's right. So we've been talking about this independent expenditure money where we don't know right now where the money's coming from. But last week, all the sort of suspicions and aspersions that have been cast and all that Dexter was being supported by AIPAC appeared very much confirmed, because on May 9th, she posted a report showing she'd raised more than $218,000 in a single day, which just in the context of a congressional campaign is a lot of money. And going through the donors from that report, it became clear that many of them live out of the state. Many of them donated as much as they can under the law, and many of them have given to AIPAC or supported candidates that AIPAC supports in the past. As I said, it was a pretty clear sign that Dexter is the candidate of choice for that group. That's interesting in part because, as I mentioned, Dexter has been clear she would like to see a ceasefire in Gaza, but it seems to be the case that she is still a more favorable candidate for these folks than Jayapal, and so she's benefited. I think we will want to watch to see, though, if there's a risk in this money, whether the very liberal Portland district she is running in looks at Dexter, sees the connection between pro-Israel groups, and decides maybe they don't want that in a candidate. That could pose a risk when it comes to votes.
Well, the primary is next week, and whoever wins will almost certainly be heading to DC and quite possibly have a very long congressional career ahead of them.
I mean, yeah, as you said, Lauren, Blumenauer was first elected in 1996. He's only just leaving Congress. And, often winning election to an open seat like this is the hard part with very, very safe districts. And once a politician wins, gets the sort of benefit of incumbency, it becomes increasingly easy to coast to re-election every 2 years. I assume that's what all of these candidates are hoping becomes their reality.
Let's pivot to the 5th Congressional District. Bryce, we knew this race would be exciting. It's one of the nation's most closely watched elections, since the candidate who wins in November could ultimately determine which party controls Congress. And it's considered a true toss-up. Can you break it down for us?
That's right, Lauren. This is a big race, and the two candidates are Jamie McLeod Skinner and Representative Janelle Bynum. McLeod Skinner is an attorney who lives with her wife in Terrebonne in Deschutes County. She's worked as an engineer and an environmental analyst, and she's also served on a variety of different boards and local governments. She's run for higher office a number of times, but she hasn't won. She's facing Oregon Representative Janelle Bynum, a fourth-term lawmaker in the Oregon House of Representatives. She's a mom with 4 kids. She owns 4 McDonald's restaurants in the Portland area, and she's also an engineer. If she were elected, she would be Oregon's first Black member of Congress. Whoever wins next week will face Representative Lori Chavez DeRemer. She narrowly beat McLeod Skinner in 2022, and she flipped this district for Republicans, becoming one of about 16 Republicans who now represent districts that President Joe Biden won in 2020. So this is a swing district because it has a lot to it, both geographically and politically. It includes the Portland suburbs and Clackamas County, smaller towns in the Willamette Valley like Albany, rural communities across the Cascade Mountains, and towns in the high desert in Central Oregon like Bend and Redmond. And the last election was decided by a slim margin, about 7,300 votes and just 2 percentage points. So the November general election could really go either way.
Democrats are largely throwing their weight behind Bynum. The governor and a lot of other high-profile leaders have endorsed her. What do you make of that?
A couple things. One is that some of them seem to be buying into something that Bynum says a lot, which is that she is a winner and she beat Lori Chavez DeRemer twice in Oregon House races. She says that she can do it again, but it's important to note that those victories were in much smaller areas that didn't include a lot of conservative communities and smaller towns that this election will see. Another is that she's well connected in the legislature. She helped pass bipartisan bills around police accountability and the local semiconductor industry. And 2 years ago, she tried to become Speaker of the Oregon House of Representatives. And at the time, she said that she had the support of Tina Kotek, who was the outgoing speaker at the time before she was elected governor. And she said that Governor Kotek didn't fulfill an agreement to support her. Governor Kotek has denied this, and ultimately Bynum failed to become speaker, but now Governor Kotek has endorsed Bynum in this race.
Well, McLeod Skinner is a familiar name too, in part because she's run for a lot of seats, including this one before.
That's right. She's probably best known for prior elections like when she ran for Secretary of State in 2020, which she lost in the Democratic primary to Shemia Fagan. She's won the Democratic nomination for Congress twice, but she lost both times, most recently to Chavez DeRemer in 2022. She says that she's well known also because she just has a lot of local grassroots support, and that includes endorsements from dozens of current and former local officials, including city councilors and school board members and attorneys and local political leaders and groups. A lot of what she says is meant to gather support from people like this by talking a lot about how she wants to bridge political divides between urban and rural Oregon and how she doesn't take money from corporate political action committees. And so, like the 3rd Congressional District, both candidates here have very similar views. They want to address climate change and stop gun violence and improve housing affordability. But the big question is whether Bynum's political support will be enough to win, or whether voters will recognize McLeod Skinner from prior elections and they'll want to vote her through the primary for a third time.
We started out this podcast talking about money. Let's wrap up talking about money. Who is financially backing these two candidates?
So far, Janelle Bynum has raised the most money in this race, a little bit more than $1 million. But just like the 3rd Congressional District, there's been a lot of outside spending pouring in these final few weeks. Much of it has been from 2 national Democratic political action committees that have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars supporting Representative Bynum. But most recently, Bynum's campaign has been voicing a lot of concern around a series of ads this week and their concern is that Republicans are meddling in this election, actually. That's because a new political action committee was formed that spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on television ads supporting McLeod Skinner's views on healthcare. The ad vendor largely works with Republican campaigns, and its treasurer may have served with the political committee that raised money for Republican Herschel Walker's campaign for a U.S. Senate seat in Georgia. So clearly, this is a high-stakes race. It's getting a lot of national attention, and it's going to be one to watch for a lot of people.
Really interesting. Okay, final question. Dirk, if you and I are still on this podcast in 2027, our conversations about money and dark money and campaign cash are going to sound a lot different.
Yes, they will. And I can't tell if I hope or not that we're still doing this in 2027. I'll get back to you on that. But you're right, Lauren, we are at the door of a brand new age in Oregon where the legislature passed campaign finance limits this past short session. Those will kick in 2027. And so some of these things we've been talking about on the federal level, that where campaign finance rules on the federal level lead to things like independent expenditures and dark money and things like that, are going to increasingly become issues in state races in Oregon. That hasn't been as much the case to date because we really have no limits. People are free to spend as they want and are often pretty transparent about it. So this kind of podcast might become a lot more prevalent going forward.
Great. Well, let's leave the conversation here for today. Bryce and Dirk, thank you for joining me. This week's episode of OPB Politics Now was produced by Andrew Thien. Our audio engineer is Stephen Cray. Our music comes from Audio Network. We may even come to you with a special episode earlier in the week to break down what happened on election night and what it all means. Until then, thank you for your support and thank you for listening.